We're going to call to order the Board of Commissioners, a regular meeting for May 3rd of the South County Fire Board of Commissioners. Could those at headquarters please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move on to approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve? Commissioner Teoflack. Do we have a second on the motion?
A second.
Commissioner Chan. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Commissioner Daniels.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to our consent agenda, we've got items 4A and 4B, which are claims vouchers. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move.
Commissioner Daniels, do you have a second? Commissioner Teoflack, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to approval of our meeting minutes for our April 12th and April 19th meetings. A motion to approve.
So move.
Commissioner Teoflack got that. Do you have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Daniels, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Commissioner Rowland is joining us right now. Moving on to public comments. We've got 6 people on the attendee side. Anybody wishing to make public comment, please use the raise your hand function and you'll be recognized and raised to the meeting to make your comment. Not seeing any hands raised. Go ahead and close public comment. Move on to item number 7, our fire chief report with Chief Isatalo. Chief Hovis is out on vacation.
Good evening, commissioners, staff, and meeting attendees. Commissioners, at Chair Burn's request, I sent you an email detailing the standard reports for COVID and South County fire response data that you usually see in the fire chief's report. In summary, we have seen an uptick in COVID cases, both in the county and here at South County Fire. We are continuing to closely monitor the situation, as well as require daily testing for all employees. The South County Fire response data shows that we are up over 9% in call volume over the last time period from the same time last year. Lori will now share a year-over-year incident volume graph showing where we ended up on responses at the end of Q1 for 2022. As you can see, this graph shows that our call volume is on a steady increase. Lori will now share a slide that shows the incident type breakdown since our last meeting on April 19th. You can see that we had 4 significant motor vehicle related responses and a total of 13 fire related responses, 4 of which were working fires and amounted to over $100,000 in damage. Lori will now share a graphic for Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. Saturday, May 7th is Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. We will be sharing these social media messages to raise awareness and share actions our residents can take to reduce wildfire risks. Lori will now share a graphic for Safe Kids Week. Next week, May 8th through the 14th is Safe Kids Week. South County Fire serves as the lead agency for Safe Kids Snohomish County, a local coalition of safe kids worldwide dedicated to preventing childhood injuries. During Safe Kids Week, we will be participating in a social media campaign to empower parents to take simple actions that can make a big difference in the safety of their children. Thank you, Lori. Finally, I would like to let the board know that this Thursday, we will have 19 recruits graduating from the Fire Training Academy. This will be a hybrid graduation ceremony with a limited number of family and department representatives allowed in person, but it also can be viewed virtually by anyone else. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the fire chief report this evening, and staff would welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions, comments for Chief Isotelo? Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, Chip Isotolo. I have been in, the last time I did a ride along was when I first got on in 2006. So I never really looked at you guys in close operations, but I have to here, I think it's appropriate for me to make a comment. I think we got best fire department we have. The reason was my brother came on in April 18. So we're thinking about going up to Vancouver, but then he started getting problem, really tired and everything else. And he couldn't sleep at the night of 18. So in the morning, we want to go urgent care, but the nursing line tell him that no, call 911. So, well, first of all, I also comment 911, the person stay on me. And you guys come in 6 minutes. Under our, now I've proven that I know Commissioner Shaw, I would talk about Lake Stickney Gap. There was no, because we are, we're in equal distance between 11 and 21, and they come in real professionally with one engine and 2 ambulance, and they are really taking commands. I definitely go and just observe, and they would take command and they took him to the Providence emergency room, and it was described to me because they analyze it because if we go to Swedish, Edmonds will be maybe trafficking and everything else. I'm just thought about, my God, that's a really lot of thinking and doing. I don't want to single out that particular ship in there, but I assume that everybody's doing the same. So I congratulate you and Deputy Chief and all the staff. This doesn't just happen like that. It has to go on for a lot of training, and I'm pretty proud to be your commissioner. And my wife always say, "Oh, why are you spending all the time?" I think this is the reward I witnessing. So I thank you and salute everybody on your rank.
Thank you, Commissioner Chan. We're always very proud of our responders, and I hope your family member is feeling better.
Yeah, he feeling better, but he need to go to stress test. He has a cancerous trait, unfortunately. So, but he's getting better, doing all the tests and everything down in California. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Teofilak?
This might be a question for Chief Eastman. For the Mill Creek vote, I saw the number of votes was like really small. It seemed like it was like 3,000 people. I could be off on that, but did we get enough turnout for the result?
There wasn't a requirement for validation, but I think if you give me, I want to say that validation, they had voter turnout was, I don't have it right in front of me, but it was over 17%. So for a special election like that, I don't think that's bad voter turnout. There's 20,000 people in the city of Mill Creek. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember the total number of registered voters, but
About 12,000.
yeah.
12,000
So
range.
you got, that's actually not a bad turnout for a special election.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was like 25, 26% or something. Yeah. Okay, great. And then I guess a question for Chief Maxwell. For the surge in COVID cases, is there a certain variant that is the most common?
The Omicron we've all been hearing about is still the predominant strain, although they are watching some other strains that they're probably closest to the Omicron strain as it is right now. At our public health meeting last week, the public health officer said that last week the numbers had doubled in the last 2 weeks, and then he really feels this week and next week will be watching for the inflection point. Where are we headed right now? So he said this week and next week will probably be the tell of what's happening right now.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Daniels, did you have your hand up before? Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Moving on to item number 8, our legal report with Rich Davis.
All right, good evening, commissioners. I'll first start with just a quick summary of what we've done in April. We've reviewed and revised contracts, fielded some questions from staff regarding public records issues, provided some guidance regarding L&I updates as those things have changed with the change in the governor's proclamations, provided some input into disaster planning, and continued to assist with the Verdant property investigation matters. The one thing that I wanted to talk about this month, I was with you a few weeks ago, and I mentioned that there was a new bill that changed the Open Public Meetings Act. Well, interestingly, as the COVID numbers tick up slightly, the restrictions are coming down, and the governor just last week rescinded the proclamation that's been in effect regarding the Public Records Act and the Open Public Meetings Act. That rescission takes effect in a month on June 1. And I wanted to just summarize what that means for the fire authority. First of all, with regards to public records, there's not a lot of changes. The major change is now the public agencies have to again allow inspections of records at their facilities. There's a requirement to be open for reasonable periods of time to allow the public to inspect. As a practical matter, most people these days, they want the records sent to them. So very few people come in to actually inspect, but that requirement will be back in effect, and the 5-day response period, it will be back in effect, which means that once we get a public records request in, we have to issue some kind of response within 5 business days. With regards to the Open Public Meetings Act, the proclamation that was in effect, and by the way, I should say that the governor has not rescinded the state of emergency. So Proclamation 2005, which was kind of the first proclamation as a result of COVID, which declared a state of emergency, that remains in effect. But 2008 is going to be rescinded. And so with the Open Public Meetings Act, that proclamation had required that you not meet in person, that you hold meetings remotely unless there was an emergency. That requirement is going away. So you do no longer have to hold meetings remotely. The default provision is that you have a meeting in a physical location. Now, you'll remember me talking a couple of weeks ago about this new statute that was passed to amend the Open Public Meetings Act. So I want to kind of, again, touch on that for a moment. There are, under the new law, there are 2 kinds of emergencies. There's the garden variety emergency that we've all been used to, where there's potential loss of property or bodily injury. We have to meet on an emergency basis in order to prevent further loss of property or avoid bodily injury. But there's a new kind of emergency that's been defined by this law, and it's called a declared emergency. So if there is an emergency declared by state, federal, local government, and the agency believes that meetings can't be safely held in a physical location, then you can still attend remotely. Again, the requirement is everybody has to be heard, and members of the public have to be able to hear what is being said as well. As it stands right now, we still have a state of emergency that's been declared by the state. That's still in effect. So with the new law, you merge those 2 together, there still is there's a declared state of emergency. And then the question is, can you meet safely in person? If the decision is you can't meet safely in person, or you have to limit physical attendance, then you could continue to have your meetings remotely, or you could limit the number of people that could attend a meeting. Otherwise, there needs to be you need to meet in a physical location as of June 1. Commissioners can still attend remotely, either by phone or if we're going to be using Zoom. You can still attend remotely as you have prior to the pandemic. And then agencies, as I noted the last time, are still encouraged, even though you're meeting in a physical location, you're still encouraged to provide opportunities for the public to see in real time what's going on or to hear what's going on in real time by telephonic means, electronic means, internet, or something of the sort. And so that's where things stand. Again, this takes effect on June 1. And I'm sure there'll be more to come after that. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, all the other council members in hybrid have the last couple of months already. How do they operate? I mean, that's my questions. And I know that Mill Creek, I'm familiar with the rule is basically you have to reserve and you have to, register and all that stuff.
What was the first part of your question, Commissioner Chan?
Oh,
Did you say hybrid?
The hybrid, yeah. They most of the city council you're kind of watching on the they're hybrid. They are.
So some of the council members join in by phone or Zoom.
And but at one time I was they all 7 would show up in there in Mill Creek. Actually, they were more, but except some of the staff was staying at home.
Well, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead.
I said, or I was thinking, interestingly, the new law doesn't change anything as far as a commissioner attending remotely. Even if you think back before the pandemic, if you were out of town or unable to make it in,
Right.
you could join by phone, and you can still do that. And as a practical matter, every commissioner could do that. And the physical location where the meeting is held would simply have a speakerphone or a screen where to broadcast things, to broadcast the Zoom meeting on the screen, but members of the public would have a physical location to go to. I don't know that there's talk of anybody doing that, but right now you can have hybrid meetings where people can attend in person or attend remotely, and that will continue to be the case even after June 1.
Okay. Yeah, I hope that we can have similar adopting the hybrid the version of it. That would be good.
Any other questions, comments for Rich Davis? All right. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 9, our union report with Matt Armstrong.
Good evening, commissioners, staff, and attendees. Local 1828 doesn't have much to report today. Tim Hoover is on shift. Wasn't sure he could stay through the whole meeting, so I have the privilege of addressing you tonight. I don't have much for you. Local 1828, let's see, what did we do? We participated in some sign waving to assist with the yes votes for Mill Creek. The locals staff members attended the Washington State Council of Firefighters educational seminar 2 weeks ago, which was a good big success for us. We enjoyed that conference, a lot of stuff learned. Commissioner Daniels will be attending Fire Ops 101. I believe that's next week. And firefighter Zach Cash will be his, for lack of a better term, chaperone. Aside from that, I think that's all that the local has to report, and I'll open up for any questions I could answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Daniels.
It's on Thursday this week that I go over and come back on Friday, and I'm over the moon. So
Yeah, you have a great time.
Zach's got his work cut out if he needs to keep Commissioner Daniels. Commissioner Chan?
Well, since talk about Op 101, Commissioner Daniel, you better get yourself fitness first. And I don't know what the heat temperature in Tri-City is. It was terrible when I was there. So, but at the end of the day, it's fun. It's to really get the understanding the whole what the staff had gone through the training. So, and I was making comments about, you mentioned about sign waving. I think the union did a very good job, and that's I think part of them, people are not aware of the whole proposition, but that kind of wake up the voter to do it. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the union? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to unfinished business, item 10A, our introduction to investments for local governments with our CFO, Chris Bothwell.
Good evening. I'm going to pull up a presentation. Oh, I can't share.
Maybe Lori or Melissa could make you a presenter.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so this is the introduction to investments for local governments. What I have for you tonight is a description of allowable investments. I'm going to start with some common examples, excuse me, and then move into some less common examples. I have a slide on the current investment environment where I will tell you about the yields of some of the more common examples or types of investments that we're allowed to invest in. I have a slide on the investment policy and attributes of an investment policy, and that is just a introduction to what you're going to be seeing when we bring a draft investment policy to you with the comprehensive financial management policies draft that's coming in a couple weeks. And then I'll close with some next steps. So state law limits the types of investments that local governments are allowed to invest in. The reason that the state gets involved in this is to make sure that we are not investing in things that are too risky. And so I've separated these out by common types and some less common types. And the difference is really that the common types are the types of things that you would see in a portfolio for an organization our size and with our resources. So some of the less common items are require a little more sophisticated investment advisor and a little more staff time than agencies our size typically have. So the first of the common types is bank deposits and other bank products. These would be things like money market accounts, savings accounts, CDs, things that you're probably mostly familiar with. Some banks get a little bit creative in what they offer to their public clients. Bank of America tends not to be super creative in that area, but it is an area that we are allowed to invest or put our money. The next item is investment pools. And so what this is you'll have an investment manager who will accept deposits from other agencies or other entities and pool those funds with their investments and then invest those according to their investment policy. And they will distribute the earnings that they earn on the investment pool out to the pool participants, as well as charge them a representative share of the costs associated with the investment management. The next three, US Treasury bonds, federal agency bonds, and corporate bonds, are all investments that you would have if you were managing your own portfolio. So they're different from the ones I just described in the sense that they require active management of an investment portfolio. So if an agency or an entity wanted to get into this type of portfolio, you would need to have a relationship with a broker dealer, and they would execute transactions on your behalf, but you would be responsible for doing all the research and initiating the transactions and the movement of money and the safekeeping and all the kind of other things that go along with that. The US Treasury and federal agency bonds are obviously very safe because they are guaranteed by the federal government. The corporate bonds are maybe a little riskier. They're still allowed under the state's limitations, but they do require a little bit more research because they aren't guaranteed by the federal government. So this slide has the less common types. These are sort of exotic things you might not have heard of in the past, like supranational agency bonds. The best example of this would be like World Bank. We're actually not allowed to invest in World Bank, but it's probably the only example that most people would recognize, including myself. There's municipal bonds that are on here. Municipal bonds, if you're not familiar with them, these are just local bonds issued by local governments. There are a ton of different varieties and they require quite a bit of research to understand really what you're buying. The last four, I'm not even going to try to describe to you. The repurchase agreements, registered local warrants, bankers acceptance notes, and commercial notes. These are, I would classify these as fairly exotic. If you're a professional in the investment space, you probably understand these fairly well, but without that level of expertise, these are pretty unusual items for somebody to invest in. So this slide has the current investment environment, and what I want to communicate here is just the yield, the various yields in the current environment for some of the more common investment types. I've got them grouped by the first two are the bank and the LGIP, and the LGIP is the local government investment pool. So this is one of the pools I described or I mentioned. It's run by the state treasurer's office, and it is, you can always get your money out of the LGIP the next day. So it's a very short-term investment. Similar to the bank, you can always get your money out of the bank the next day, or you can transfer it for payroll or whatever you need. Because these are short-term, the rates are also very low. So you'll see the annual rate, the yield on these annualized is under 0.5%. And the earnings on $1 million for a year would be around $4,000. So it's fairly small, but you can get your money anytime you want it. Excuse me. And these are very safe, and they require basically no staff effort because you can always get your money the next day. You don't even really need to do a cash flow analysis before you invest in these because you can always pull your money out. The next two are the pools. So there's the Snohomish County Investment Pool. This is just one of the investment pools that I kind of described that's run by our county. It has an annual yield of approximately 1%, which will get you about $10,000 a year on $1 million investment. This is not quite as liquid, so you need to give them some notice before you can get your money back out. They will always give you your money, but there is some risk of loss if you kind of demand your money. If you say, I want my money on Friday, there's a risk that they're going to have to go out to the markets and take a loss on an investment that you have. The risk is very low because these are being managed by professional managers, and the level of staff involvement or the required staff, the staff required to manage this is very, very low for us. The next one is the Washington Treasurer separately managed account. This is a little bit different in that the treasurer keeps a separate ledger of your investments. Otherwise, it's just like a regular pool, but it's also a longer, they have an over 2-year maturity, average maturity, so duration on this, which causes the yield to go up significantly. So you can see you've got about $29,000 that you would earn in a year on $1 million investment. Again, it takes a little while to get your money back out of it. So to turn your investment back into cash can take up to 6 months. So it requires a careful cash flow analysis. The risk is very low, and the staff involvement is very low. And the last three are what the types of investments, if you're managing your own investment portfolio, that you would typically invest in. So there's US Treasuries, federal agency bonds, and corporate bonds. And you can see that the approximate annual yield for those is very high relative to the others. And the estimated earnings of between $26,000 and $30,000 per year for every $1 million that you have in them. These are not very liquid, so you have to wait until a maturity to get your money back out of these. So to turn them back into cash can take a while, and you have to keep your eye on the maturities and your cash flow if you're investing in these types of instruments. The risk when you're talking about things that are guaranteed by the federal government is very low. In the course of, for corporate bonds, it's just low. You have to do your research and really know what you're buying. And the involvement from staff is pretty significant because you're responsible for doing all the research and initiating the transactions and managing the investments on the backside. So I'm going to switch gears and go to common attributes of an investment policy. And these are the types of topics that you're going to see when we bring a policy to you. These are the types of things you're going to see in that draft policy. So the first one is an investment objective. In the agenda materials, I mentioned that the #1 objective for all public portfolios is going to be safety. We don't want to lose any of the public's money. The second and third are generally going to be liquidity and return on investment in any particular order. The other topic that'll be covered in the investment policy will be roles and delegation. So who's doing what and who's responsible for what. We will attempt to identify the allowable investments. So the menu of options that I just mentioned, we will probably identify exactly what it is that we want to invest in. There will be a section to identify the funds that are available for investment. So That can be based on a cash flow analysis or the type of money where it's being held in terms of what fund it's in or what kind of restrictions are on the funds. But that'll be specific to the organization, but that'll be in there. And then there's operating and procedural considerations. This will really be dictated by the nature of the investments that are in the policy. And then oversight and reporting is similarly, that'll be kind of driven by what the nature of the investments that are covered by the policy. So for next steps, on June 14th at the work session, we're planning to do a presentation and discussion of the draft comprehensive financial management policies, and the investment policy will be one of those. We'll be within that presentation. On July 5th at the regular meeting, we're maybe going to ask you to consider adoption of those policies. We'll see how things go on the 14th and see if we get through it. And if everybody seems like they're moving in the direction of wanting to adopt it, we'll bring that back on the 5th. Otherwise, we can always extend that. And then we will start to implement those policies that are adopted immediately thereafter. I'm going to unshare and take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any initial questions, comments? Commissioner Lawrence?
Yeah, what about real estate? That's probably gonna have a much larger return. So, but difficult to do. Instead of like there's we need lots of property, but we're not sure, we'll just go buy it anyway. And so, well, we'll sell it later and much higher return, and I'd say pretty safe. Also, how many millions of dollars do we have to invest?
So that's something we'll have to work out in the policy with exactly how we calculate that. I can tell you, like right now, our surplus cash in excess of what we need for float for operations is probably about $40 or $50 million, but that includes some of the upcoming capital needs as well. So we have plans, pretty ambitious capital facilities plan that's been adopted. And so some of that money presumably would fund part of that plan as well. At the end of 2021, I would say we probably had about $45 million.
Okay, what about buying property? Is that allowable investment?
I don't know that you would necessarily, I mean, it's as a practical matter, I think what you're suggesting is probably allowed. I don't know that we could buy it as an investment per se. I think we'd have to say this is somewhere we plan to site a station, or it's a potential location for something we want to do, recognizing that it maybe, if those plans don't work out, it will be a reasonably good investment, or maybe it's a great investment. But it wouldn't necessarily be covered. If we put it in the investment policy that we were investing in real estate, I think that might be a problem. So we would maybe have to ask somebody a little smarter than me about that topic.
Actually, I wasn't. It was just like, let's say we're thinking about, we're not so sure about that being a location. Well, never mind, just buy it. And if it turns out, well, that wasn't the best guess. Yeah, it's for places that we're thinking we need properties instead of, really being to be super careful. No, just go ahead and buy. We can buy 2 or 3 or 4 and just kind of shotgun method. And then we have time to figure out which works best. Right, Chief Eastman? All right, thank you.
Commissioner Chan, then Commissioner Rowland.
Actually, I think it would be great that you could tell us what's a working capital. I probably would not risking the liquidity part of it to some money that we need 1 or 2 years. I think the worst risk, though, some of them is we're forgiving the interest you earn, right? Early withdrawal. That's not loss of capital, I assume, especially on some of the government bonds and treasury.
Right, they're probably going to claw back some of your earnings in most cases, right. But I mean, market conditions change. You could lose.
Right. I'm sorry.
Sorry, if you had to go out, if you were holding on to something that had a maturity maybe 2 years out and you needed to dump it right now, there's a good chance that, not a good chance, there's a chance that the market would penalize you for that and you would end up getting less than you had actually purchased it for. I mean, that is a risk.
Okay. At one time I was a controller for a bank and repurchase agreements, a repo. Are we allowed to do that? I thought it was only bank doing that.
There are certain situations where you can. It was on the list of more exotic instruments.
Right. But it's not that complicated. I mean, it's pretty short term. So no, interesting. I mean, that can be doing too. And then now I think in the policy, I think you can identify, kind of report to us what is, some fund that we can really stay, we don't use it 3 or 4 years. And then I would encouraging that, get a higher yield. Now, just recently, I just saw in CNBC's some called iBond. It caught my eyes. It can deliver 9.62% interest for the next 6 months. Let me read it here. It's part of the bonds, the government bond, but are you familiar with that at all? Okay.
I'm not.
But there's a limited amount we can buy, but still a lot. I thought that's really interesting. Great. I think overall, I think it's good that we should invest. And I'm not sure the Snohomish County, I think we used that before the pool, but the yield is not that great. So we probably, I think all the investment you list out, it's pretty good. I thank you for doing that.
Commissioner Rowland?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the I-bonds. I know those are based on inflation, but normally they're longer term,
Right.
what I remember. Anyway, my comment was towards Commissioner Lawrence. I don't know if he's still on here given this video, but it was, okay, cool. I know that during the training that Commissioner Daniels and I attended, they did talk about the subject of purchase of properties and being very careful about that, because that's something that the auditor looks at to make sure that you were purchasing it, I guess, in good faith and not doing it for investment purposes. So I think we definitely would want to do our due diligence on that. I'm going to go back and try to find it in the actual training material, but just something that I do remember them covering, and something that we should just dot all our I's and cross all our T's.
Commissioner Teoflock?
So question, do we have our money in like different buckets, like our capital facilities bucket, general fund bucket, stuff like that?
So I think what you're describing is funds. So we have we have several accounting entities that are called funds. And so we have a capital fund and a general fund, and then we have emergency, the name escapes me, but there's an emergency fund. Yeah, the rainy day fund. And then like LEF1 fund. So we have a bunch of accounting entities. The money actually gets pooled into just, currently we have the Snohomish County pool, the LGIP, and our bank. So it's just that it's an accounting, it's a fiction of accounting, not necessarily bank accounts, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. And is that how you would foresee managing the policy, is where it's kind of the money is commingled, the different goals are commingled?
That's a great question. And that's something that we'll tackle with the policies. I think that, when we have something like an emergency fund, maybe we don't want to do anything longer than, an LGIP or something that we can get from our bank where we can use it immediately. I think those are the kinds of issues that when we bring a draft policy to you, we'll be thinking about, and we'll obviously present what we're coming up with and kind of take your temperature on it. But any thoughts you have about, what you'd like to see that look like, this is a great time to share that too.
Yeah. Personally, I think that the investment policy is dependent upon the time horizon and liquidity needs of that goal. So I like to separate the goals, like the account by the goal. So for instance, if you would have multiple LGIP accounts potentially, one for the emergency fund and one for blah, 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 blah. So that's how I understand it better. Okay. As opposed to using like a spreadsheet to figure out where the money is for the different purposes.
I appreciate that comment. I'm not sure that the LGAP will allow us to have more than one account, but
Gotcha.
definitely in the accounting system, we do have it accounted for that way. And we allocate the interest earnings in the system based on those balances. So we can always report it to, even if LGAP doesn't allow us to do that, we can always report it to you that way, because I certainly understand that comment.
Okay, excellent. And then I think for me personally, that corporate bonds would be too risky for government, for the public's money, because you do have that real risk of default. And even if the historical default rate is low, when we have market volatility like during the pandemic, or really any time where the stock market goes down a lot, where credit risk is high, those good corporate bonds will go down in value temporarily, and it's just not worth the heartache or the headache to see that value go down, not knowing what the future will hold. So it feels better to me to have something that's government backed, that okay, well, this, if we just hold it to maturity, for sure we'll get our principal back.
Excellent. I appreciate that comment. I'll make a note for sure. And just philosophically, I tend to agree with you. It kind of stresses me out to think that we have things that are risky in our portfolio.
Yeah, and our we're not experts in credit evaluation. So and then also for me, there's a part of me that has some concerns with maturities of over a year, just because things can change. And I feel like just for flexibility purposes, it's best to be able to know that we can always access that money within the next 12 months at the worst case scenario. And then for individual bonds, like the treasuries or the federal agency bonds, is your idea that we would do like a ladder?
Yeah, we would, I mean, eventually we would ladder them. I mean, there's going to be, when we first get in, there's not going to be a whole lot that's going to be available in the real short term, but eventually we would ladder it out to be probably 2 years or something like that. If you want it to be shorter, we could always go shorter. That's a great conversation to have when we have the policy discussion.
Okay.
But I appreciate your thoughts now as well. It'll help us formulate that policy when we bring it to you.
Yeah, understanding the length of the ladder, and then also the number of rungs in the ladder as well. Cool. All right, I think I'm done.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, CFO Bothwell, I agree with you. I think in the past, always pulling all the funds together, because some of those reserve in a small amount. It does not make sense to be exactly which account, separate account. As you mentioned, some of the institutions would not allow you a multiple account. And I think the major to me is that some fund, left one example, many of the fund were not used for a long time. So, I mean, just not that particular fund, but even some of the thing that capital facility plan, that some of the funding we will not start going until 5 years, 10 years from now. So I think that will go by whatever. Then I think what we said, liquidity, what is the working capital, what other one are. I think that's important. Same thing about, I think the major part is diversification, right? That's a key thing in there, because, so you don't put all egg in one basket. I think that's the key issues to me. So you might lose some of the, some bonds, whatever, maturity wise, we don't get it. But at the same time, I think that's how you manage a better yield, because all in the past, we never really pay attention at all. So our yield has been really low. So I like to see something better. But of course, what you wrote down to is you want it to be 40,000 to 300,000 interest income annually. So I don't, the range is pretty big, but maybe and then also depending on the interest environment, right? Because right now interest rate going up 5.25 now, and the Fed is going to go another 50% or twice until the end of the year. And Fed chair mentioned that he was using all his power to to fight inflation. So we got to be more conscious about. And I assume that you can still get some advice, right? Can you get consultant for whatever market, whatever institution we use to help us?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we can do, so it depends on what we're investing in. If we're investing in things like the LGIP or pools, we can't really influence their investment policy. We just put our money with them and they operate based on their policy. But if we're managing our own portfolio, we could absolutely bring on an investment advisor. It's a really smart thing to do. If we're trying to manage it our own and we're just buying treasuries and agencies and stuff like that's relatively safe and we're just managing it on our own, usually your broker dealer will give you a little bit of kind of guidance, but they aren't responsible for what's actually for your transactions. So we have a couple options there. And we can definitely consider that if we're going to manage our own portfolio, we definitely should be having a conversation about investment advisors.
Yeah, no, I encourage you, if you do that, investment advisor, I think sometimes it helped you a lot because those guys on daily market wise and give you, what the forecast is. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Any additional questions, thoughts, comments? Commissioner Teoflag?
So I guess just some further clarification on my rationale for trying to keep maturities at 12 months or less is knowing that when you do buy an individual bond like a treasury in an increasing interest rate environment, the treasury that you purchased in the past is going to be trading at a discount to par. So if you need to access your investments, it's easier to know that, okay, everything for sure, we'll have everything in cash in the next 12 months. And we won't have to, there'll be less of a chance where you'll have to sell something before maturity at a loss potentially, where I feel like more than a year, there's just, of course, a higher probability that we might have to sell something before maturity. And I don't think we need to be greedy. We're just earning a little bit more money, but not trying to make as much as we can. And keeping things simple. So I feel like if you're just investing in a laddered approach of treasuries, an investment advisor isn't going to help at all, because we're the ones that understand our cash flow timing needs. There's nothing else an investment advisor can help with unless we did like corporate bonds, like credit analysis, which I don't believe we should do.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that we'll do when we come back with the policy is we'll take a look at the rates that were on the table that I showed you earlier were based on a 20 to 30 month maturity on all those investments. I just reached out to somebody I used to work with and got those numbers. What we can do is contrast that with rates that would be something shorter. So everybody can see kind of what the difference is in yields when you go a little shorter too. So thank you for those comments.
Any further questions, comments? All right, thank you very much. Look forward to this coming back and much more to report on. I'll move on to unfinished business. Item 10B, or basement improvement update with Chief Isotelo and Eastman.
Thank you, Chair Urban. As the board may recall, we contracted recently with TCA Architecture to provide architecture and design services to include first floor code review and renovation design to allow for permitted use of the area. They have recently finished the estimate and it was included in the board packet starting on page 47. TCA estimates that the work required would cost approximately $331,000 plus tax. After meeting with them today about the specifics of the scope of the work, we were informed that the county may also require some reconstruction of the stairwell in the center of the building. If they do, this could add approximately another $30,000 to $40,000. TCA is currently waiting to hear back from the county on their final decision about the stairwell. The majority of the work is labor and it is electrical in nature. Essentially, this project, once completed, will allow us to continue to use the first floor for storage as we have over the last 16 years. It also will make the restrooms ADA compliant as required by the code. With the board's approval, staff will work on finalizing all costing with TCA and the county. Once completed, we will put the project out for bid. We will then bring the final project cost back to the board for final approval. We are estimating that this will take up to 6 weeks to complete. Staff wanted to bring this estimate back to the board for your review and discussion. We are not asking for any action tonight. Chief Eastman, do you have anything to add to brief the board? No?
I do not, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
And just to clarify, this was a longstanding issue. We've been using it for storage, and we finally got, fire marshal said, yeah, you guys need to fix this stuff, correct?
Yeah, that's right. When I brought this, I believe during a capital facilities committee update, Commissioner Kenny asked me to brief the board on it several months ago. That is correct. April 30th of last year, it was noted as a violation in the county fire marshal's inspection. And clear back to 2006 from the fire chief at the time, the county has a letter that stated we would not use the first floor for anything. And over time, it has become a storage area for, I think, nearly every division in the department.
And to clarify, this gets us to code for storage. What is that? What does storage mean? And what are the acceptable uses?
Well, essentially, that's what we've been using it for, is just that storage. We cannot have any offices. It'll look and appear much like it does today. It will just be that everything is appropriately secured to the structure as it should be to meet the code. And of course, the bathrooms will be remodeled where they sit just to meet the ADA and clearance in that. The stairwell is, as I said, a long-term issue. TCA actually recalled back in 2006, we had a lot of the same people doing the work on this project, that was an issue back then. We're about 3 steps short, they said, of meeting code in that the steps are too tall. But they have some design ideas if the county is going to require us to upgrade that stairwell, placing a small landing at the bottom with an additional step or 2 so that we could meet the code. But it would require essentially gutting that area of the stairwell completely and then rebuilding the risers for the steps. So it would look much like it does today. I mean, this isn't going to look like, you swing the door open when the project's done and it's got all kinds of fancy finishings and such. It still will have the exposed ceiling. It will still have all the exposed lighting and stuff. It'll just be appropriately secured to the structure. There will be some minor repairs, as you saw in the estimate, to, some cracks in the floor and some things like that. Bathrooms will be painted and walls will be painted. With the electrical, they're going to reuse the majority of the fixtures that are down there, but there are definitely certain areas that are dark. And so there'll be additional fixtures with controls installed in those areas.
So we can't have permanent offices down there. Are we able to use it for any human purpose?
Really, it's kind of transient use for humans. So it would be if you're in there doing business with the stored goods or storing things. We had some folks that had little temporary workspaces and such. Facilities had a space down there. We relocated those people up to the 2nd floor. So it is really just for transient human occupancy, not long-term.
Okay, Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes, Chief. $300,000 for storage. Why don't we just buy some containers, put them in the yard there?
Well, I mean, I suppose that's potentially an option. The point would be is if we don't do something in the basement area, we would be required to vacate all of the stuff that's down there, which there's quite a bit, and we would have to come up with some temporary structures or connexes or something of the sort, which would have a cost as well.
Right. I can't imagine that he'd be even a smidgen of that $300,000. I mean, for storage, and then can't we throw away most of that stuff anyway?
I think the majority of it has use still to the RFA.
One of the other things, Commissioner Lawrence, is when we start going down the path of Connex boxes, the other reality you have is heat and keeping them hot and cold, the temperature variations that go along with it, the challenges of ventilation, the challenges of rodents. I mean, it depending on certain things, Connex boxes work. The training division has Connex boxes. We put certain things in it. But there are some huge challenges with Connex boxes for the wide range of things that are being stored in the basement. The other piece of that is you have to have some place to put the Connex boxes. And though headquarters looks like we have a lot of real estate, when you start putting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Connex boxes down, you lose real estate that we use at the training academy, back parking, and it creates other challenges from a logistics perspective that I think we talked early on about Connex boxes being used to do some of that work. And because of some of the things we're storing and the cost of some of the things we're storing, some of it's bunker gear, right? At $2,500 a set. You get rodents in and wreck 60 sets of bunker gear in the current environment we're in, where it's taking you 120 to 180 days to get. It affects operations to the point where some of those things aren't actually realistic approaches for us to take. Is kind of why we continue to drive down where Chief Isotale has taken it, is as getting the basement. We need the space to store. We need storage space. We don't have enough. And it's environmentally controlled and those pieces, and secured in a way that we didn't go down that path for those various reasons. And I'm you know the challenges you can have with containers when you're doing that work.
Okay, I'm convinced.
Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, I think last time when we discussed Chief Eastman, I think that, didn't you say you have the original plan that we had when Chief with us? We're supposed to have classrooms and all that stuff. We're supposed to get federal funding for that. Unfortunately, we did not. Do you still have that plan?
So we have the original. I wouldn't necessarily say they were architectural plans. What we did is took the plans from the basement early on when we entered in the building in 2007, and looked at what the basement would look like. At the time, back at that point in time, there were still federal dollars available with the potential to turn it into a regional training center. That funding, as we all know, in 2008, that funding dried up post Great Recession. So the facilities plan has identified redoing the basement based on not only looking at that document that we had from 2007, but talking to staff across all divisions to look at what not just today's needs are, but what tomorrow's needs potentially will be, from central stores to operations to training to the fire marshal's office, to the prevention folks and the educators, to Leslie and the rest, and have an idea of what the space needs are, and let that information inform the facilities plan as to what we're doing and what we identified being needed to be done at headquarters, right? And I'm going to say the headquarters complex. Now, there's no architectural plans drawn up, but there was enough information about needs and what space would look like that we were able to put a cost associated with it that would meet the needs as we identified through the facility plans process. So I think the plans that we had in 2007 are a little bit dated. I think the facilities plan and the I'm going to say it's the 400-page document that goes along with it, that if you go in and look at headquarters building, you'll see what we defined as the basement, the needs and the costs associated with it, that I believe in the end, when we get headquarters, the facelift upstairs and the basement where it really needs to be, we'll have the funds. We've identified the needed funds to be able to do that work. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, actually, I encourage you the other way. Not shrinking it, and think about it. If something, I think your space, office space, kind of get limited as we're getting. We just welcome us to the Mill Creek, right? So eventually, I see our operation will be expanding. I know that one thing is the West Wing is not real well configured. So I encourage you that if something that you mentioned, we might even need some additional space as classrooms or offices, I would say encouraging you to lay out the groundwork so we don't have to pay again 2 years from now, or if something that's convenient. And so have that plan. I think that the administration, you gotta tell us, what will you need eventually. So I would go that direction, because eventually we need the room. So we gotta think ahead. I agree. Thank you for that. And you can come back up. What else do you need?
Commissioner Rowland? You're on mute. Commissioner Rowland, you're on mute.
There we go. That's better. I was basically of the same kind of thought process there. If we're going to go about remodeling the downstairs and doing a bigger project, anything that we're doing now could end up being thrown away and redone. So maybe accelerating the timeline of starting that work or getting it in there. How long do we have to start getting this compliance taken care of before we can't use it? Number one, and number two, I guess how much of this do we think is going to just it'll get us to storage, but will just be temporary expenditures given the larger remodel?
So Commissioner Rowland, typically the inspections by the fire marshal's office are done annually. So we're due again for them to come back, and obviously the smaller things that we were noted for deficiencies have been fixed and were fixed last year. So we should be good in that area, but we're still in progress on figuring out what we're going to do with the basement and that. But I anticipate that here any time they'll be making a call to come back out and do another inspection. So we're kind of to the point where time is a bit of the essence. I think we can show some significant progress from a year ago, and we've got estimates and we've got it in front of the board to see which direction you would like to go. But we're getting to the point after 16 years of occupying a space that we were not supposed to be in, that we kind of need to take action and correct our course a little bit. The estimate from TCA on far as this expenditure, what part of it would be potentially not used or money spent now that would be undone later with a more significant renovation of the basement, and their kind of rough number to that was 5 to 8% would be maintained. So it would be a fairly large portion of it, but this would get us the permitting to occupy now, and while we worked through the cap facilities plan or the will of the board to come up with a different plan to create a different tenant improvement and coding.
Got it. And have we explored the costs associated with if we had to vacate that area, get the stuff out of storage and put it into some other commercial storage or scatter it into storage between the different fire stations? Has that been explored so that we can kind of understand what that is? Because it seems like if 92 to 95% of this is going to be thrown away, if I understood that 5 to 8 is what we would retain. So if 95% of this is going to be thrown away, I think it would probably be a better idea to do some temporary storage, get a accelerated plan for doing the full remodel, and let's just get that done so that we're not throwing away $290,000 or $280,000 of taxpayer money on a temporary fix.
Commissioner Kenny?
I think we should move forward with the looking for bids and proceeding with the basement update. The issue to me is, are we throwing away that money? Are we going to be doing the grand renovation of headquarters next year? And my guess is it will be a number of years before we do the full renovation of headquarters. My recollection is we're into the teens in terms of millions of dollars on the renovation. And we would have to come up with funding first. Maybe the funding will be in two, voter approved bonds. Maybe it'll be two separate voter approved bonds. How likely is a large renovation taking a significant percentage of the money in the first round of funding to happen, as opposed to being able to say we are renovating or building fire stations across the geographic areas of South County Fire. I kind of think the latter, not the former. So it could be a number of years. It also allows us to kick the can down the road on, do we want to, are we staying at our headquarters location for a very long time? We're not going to put those millions in unless we are. And, there has at least been some thought. I'm not sure I'm a proponent of it, but I at least want to give fair, airtime to, there have been raised the idea of selling the headquarters location and building a headquarters somewhere else or moving to a headquarters somewhere else. And in fairness, those options should probably be considered. So my guess is we are going to be in headquarters for a number of years. If we were going to be out of headquarters next year, we were doing the grand renovation next year, I would say, well, maybe that 330 is going to be wasted. But my guess is we're going to be there for multiple years. We've kind of we're kind of in the red zone of the good graces of the county fire marshal, and I think we probably want to move forward on that, take care of it, even though a grand renovation might wipe out most of it. I still think it's money well spent to kind of bridge this gap, which I think will be a number of years as we figure out what we're doing overall with this capital facilities plan, and in particular, the headquarters piece to it. Thank you.
Commissioner Daniels, then Commissioner Jan.
Excuse me. I agree with Commissioner Kenny. I think that we should move forward with the $330,000 proposal.
Commissioner Jan.
Oh, yeah, I agree with Commissioner Kenny too, but also too, before we start thinking about selling the property, if you gotta look at carefully on the newest light rail plan go up to Everett, it was pretty go by real close to our headquarters. So there's another, beside the option of selling it, we might go vertical. So that is another option there, because location, that's real estate. I think we're sitting on a very prime piece of land, especially the training and all that. I think that need to be considered.
DC Eastman. So on the making the basement habitable, what was the rough approximation of that number? Not for the grand renovation, but just make it habitable, be able to do training and storage on the basement. Were we in the like 1 to 3 million range?
I need to go look, Commissioner Urban. I know the full project was between 11 and 17 million. Realizing that included repaving the back parking lot, redoing the training classroom there next to the training tower, that included renovations upstairs and downstairs. So I need to go back and look. I don't have that off the top of my head. I apologize.
But if that number was from any time more than a year ago, that number is probably way wrong, given cost of construction.
We have escalators in it that have been pretty accurate. So we put in where the number, if we move it around, it's on a sliding scale. If we look at it today, look at it tomorrow, look at it 10 years from now, we have escalators built in to give us inflationary numbers associated with construction. So we should be able to do that with regards to that. One of the things that I will say is even if we decided today we're going to redo and do something at headquarters, the permit process and the architectural process is probably 6 to 12 months at a minimum in the current environment we live in. And not knowing any more about that kind of arena, I know it's not like if the board gave us approval to do X at this building at headquarters, before we would even do anything with the construction aspect of it, I'm pretty sure we're into it for 12 months before we can move forward with anything. And it's probably closer to a year and a half based on just my conversations with TCA, just to keep that in perspective. Although I probably would say And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we showed that progress moving forward, my guess is the fire marshal would see us moving the direction to permanently solve it. And we may be able to have a conversation with them and let that be okay too. But I would want to have that conversation to them prior to going down that effort, so we don't start that and then realize we bite ourselves.
Yeah, today TCA reported that for this minor renovation to create this space for storage, they've actually already been working quite a bit with the county and the head county fire marshal. So they're aware of the progress that we're making, and they're actually waiting for the county on some decisions like the stairwell. But they were saying for this project, it would actually be about 6 weeks. Anything else is at a minimum 6 months if we were to change this and try to add other things to occupy it in a different way. So,
Well, while I share Commissioner Rowland's, distaste of, losing all this, money essential, it doesn't sound like we're at a 5 or 6 year window of HQ being completely overhauled. And so for 300 grand, if we're getting 6 years out of this space as storage, what would it cost us to buy Connex or to get storage outside somewhere else? And we just call that essentially rent for the cost of replacement and fixing. Commissioner Rowland?
Yeah, I think if we're going to go through and renovate it, if we get it up to that minimum occupiable, that would be the better place to go, just because if we're looking at this, that maybe we move, maybe this is an ends up being a great investment that we, had this property for so long, trying to sell it with, a basement that still needs $1 million worth of work on it is going to be, more difficult, but maybe they'll just tear it down. So yeah, just knowing what that storage cost is would help to, tell us what our timelines are and if it's worth it.
So Commissioner Rowland, we'll look into that. But the thing that's going to be hard to measure in the cost is the logistics of staff's time to, go out and, even if it were out on the back parking lot, which we don't have room for, that's probably not an option. So we would be leasing a space, would be travel time and such for staff to go to a location to pick up or to, check assets or whatever it is. Daily, several of us go down the stairs to check or do something or grab something and put it in interdepartment mail. So that would be something that would be very hard to judge as staff's time because it is so close just being in the basement currently.
Understood. Thank you.
Anything else on this topic?
Chair Urban, if I could just add one closing, the $330,000 amount, has been discussed here. TCA was very insistent that we be very cautious with that number in kind of these uncertain times, supply chain issues. While most of this is labor, there may be some stuff that there's a weight on or that the prices go up on with the inflation and such. The construction industry is only going up the cost of labor and such. So they have an inflator into this, but they just wanted to caution us that that is an estimate. That is their best work that they can do, knowing what they know today. But I think we could probably all understand that this may come back at the 400 or north of that a little bit, just depending on timing and how we do this. So I just wanted to let the board know so there was no surprises if you see me back in 4 to 6 weeks with an additional update or an ask that it may be more than the 330. That 330 doesn't include the tax either. So that's very clear in the estimate. So I'll just close with that. Thank you, sir.
Understood. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11A, our EMS week resolution with Sean Maxwell and Sean Ray Guzman.
Great. Thank you, Chair and Board. Normally when we ask you to approve this resolution, where Sean Ray and her team are planning a big EMS week and open houses, but not this year. This year we're still coming out of the end of the pandemic. So it kind of made me decide that maybe I just, kind of reflect on where we've came from and where we're at. Commissioner Chan, I really appreciate your personal story there. I think we're really good at the numbers in this organization and, quantifying everything. But I think Commissioner Chan, that highlights that if you quantify it, that 93 calls that we showed earlier, we're going out and making a personal touch. That kind of the voices and the humans behind these numbers every 15 minutes is what 93 calls a day. So that means every 15 minutes we're going out and we're creating one of those impressions in our community. And I can tell you that I probably get a complaint, and it's usually a misunderstanding once a month. Yet 93 times a day, our people are out there doing a very, very good job. We've been putting on some training this week, and I'm just humbled. Our instructors and our people care so much, and they are doing that added. We're doing a surgical airway training. That's when you can't intubate and you have to, cut someone's throat to get an airway. That is upper deck education, and we're doing very fine education on that this week, that upper level service to our citizens. So I just think we really have to applaud our frontline providers. They're very impressive. I look at over the last 20 years, and we have really matured as an organization. We look from the board down to the bottom, and we're known for this nationally, is we look at our organization, whether it's community risk management, hazmat, fire, rescue, EMS, we look at all parts equally, and we look at all those parts as equal importance to the service of our citizens. And over the last 20 years, we've received not one or two, but 3 national awards. So that's not us just saying we're good. Our peers have chosen those awards. And now we've matured to the point where we are the ones who now are part of the selection committee to decide other people if they're meeting that national standard. We've also created at least 4 programs, which community medics, our checklists, our ACT program, our pandemic manual that have reached, created best practices and gone around the world as a model for others. So from the top with our commissioners all the way to our newest firefighters, I'm just going to be honest, I'm bursting with pride. I'm very, very proud when I see the work of our people on the front lines and the high caliber work they do. So with that, I would just ask that you approve this resolution to celebrate our providers and the good work they do out in the field.
John, anything to add?
I don't think I could top that, so I'll just be that mic drop. Thank you.
You made her get on this call and you just took it all.
Well, I will say, since Shauna Reeves came on board, the collaboration with our teams, I think it's been very different than in the past. The Falls team works seamlessly with our community medic team. We had a meeting today, and sometimes it's hard to tell where the line is because her outreach team works so closely with our teams, and I think it creates a real synergistic effect for our community.
Fantastic. Do you have a motion to approve? Yeah, Commissioner Rowland was fastest. So Commissioner Rowland's motion to approve resolution number 05032022-07, the resolution proclaiming May 15th to the 21st, 2022 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Do we have a second? Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Chan? And do we have any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, I think Chief Maxwell, I think you said it well, but I think it's also the team, partnership. I think that's critical. It just happened. I was going to reserve to my comment, but I can make it now. I was in Rotary Club. They had this called Community Health Center. You're familiar with Snohomish County?
Mm-hmm.
They're doing exactly similar thing we We do. So when I went asked them, the person who do the presentation did not know about us. I don't know, maybe she wasn't really connection. Do we have any connection with them? And these are the comments. I think maybe you don't answer right now, but I think it's critical that we have to reach out with all our partners to do this. We cannot do alone on this.
The Community Health Center, Commissioner?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think they're just a really big organization. We absolutely have relationships with them.
Oh, okay, great.
Any additional comment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Commissioner Lawrence? I didn't see a hand or hear anything. Commissioner Lawrence, are you there? Well, motion passes in without Commissioner Lawrence's hand. Moving on to commissioner comments. Any commissioners wishing to make comment? Commissioner Cham?
Well, I'm trying to reach out my original where my thing is. A couple of things homelessness is I was at the Mill Creek council meeting this morning, and this is called Housing Authority Alliance for Housing Affordability, and point out that now the affordability in this sub-county is really terrible. And so the homelessness is become a big issue. I know everybody quite aware that Edmonds is going to have this big discussions about prohibiting people in the park, that type of thing. So I think we need to get into a lot of discussion and some of the meeting with them because we are part of it. So I would like to see how can we get our awareness of it. And then the second issue that we have a light rail coming in. There's a big debate on the plan that on 164, the Ashway should be on the east side of the freeway or west side of the freeway. As we all know, that has been Chief Isoda, you probably know about that. That's the biggest congestions over the freeway there, right? So in a sense, for the rest of the streets, how do we go? The new plan go all the way up to Everett. I think we need to put out at least some voices in there because all the traffic congestion will be a huge problem for us. As we are getting Mill Creek and everything, we are truly up as our name is Sub-County Fire and Rescue. So we need to more participate or get some more input into this decision. I know right now it's basically mayor type of people involved. I think we should get ourselves involved. Maybe we should get involved. I myself am not getting involved so much tomorrow, right? Melissa, are you still going to that meeting? Okay, so we got to be aware what is playing ahead for us. I think as a commissioner, we should really not looking today's operation, really 10 years from now, where do we want to go? What do we need to do? So I am encouraging I will put suggested one of the gender. How do we solve all this? Participate in the issue and solve, well, part to solve the problem. So that's and then I also want to thank many people supporting the Proposition 1 and is great, and we can move on for the next cities and other things. Thank you.
Great. I wanted to bring up one topic. So I spoke with Mayor Holtzclaw, who commented when the first ballots dropped. He remarked that he was driving by station 76 and the first ballot drop was 76%. So he thought that was kind of interesting. We're trying to work on a joint meeting between the Mill Creek City Council and our Board of Commissioners. One thought is next Tuesday to join on the Mill Creek call ahead of our meeting because they start at 6. So we're working with them on scheduling a quick 15 to 20-minute introduction between our board and the full council. So we'd be able to join on their meeting and then start our meeting at 7. So we'll be following up with kind of timing and if we can get that on the schedule. The second would be potentially sometime in early June to do an in-person meeting of the two entities, potentially at HQ with maybe a bit of a South County Fire show and tell of some of our apparatus equipment and some of the training and resources that we have, and have something in person and be able to kind of show off some of the South County Fire assets, which mainly is our staff, but then also our equipment. So as we look to that, we'll be reaching out and trying to schedule kind of that joint meeting. Any additional comments for commissioner comments? All right. It is now 8:27. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we're going to be joining back in executive session for potential litigation pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I. We'll call that initial for 15 minutes with the potential to extend, and no plan to take action following the executive session. So for those who are to be attending the executive session, there's a separate link in your email, and we'll join on there at 8:40. See you in about 10 minutes. Thank you, staff.
The executive session has been extended for 5 minutes. The executive session has been extended for 10 minutes. The executive session has been extended for 5 minutes. The regular meeting has been called back to order at 9:10 p.m. and without objection, the regular meeting has been adjourned.